Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I are joined by two of the senior leaders from Fortris. This is a company that helps organizations put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, incorporate into their treasury strategy, and really incorporate digital assets into their daily operations. With that being said, we've got a lot to talk about. Before we get into it though, take a second, smash the like button guys, big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below if you've heard of Fortris before, if you've ever used any of their products or services, and your outlook on the Bitcoin sector as a whole in 2025. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's interview. Okay, you guys, this is a really exciting interview for both Anthony and I. We have two members of the senior team from Fortris here. Noah Herman, he's the Chief Revenue Officer, and John Mongeau, Strategic Sales Mining. We're excited to learn a little bit more about this business. We actually met up in New York most recently at a few of these conferences. It's been great getting to know you guys on a personal level. Now we want to hear a little bit more about the business itself.
Excellent.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Right on. So we'll get right into it. This is kind of the standard question on the channel for your first visit. Maybe I'll ask you first, Noah, and then we can go over to you, John. How did you get involved with Bitcoin? What was your orange pill moment, so to speak? And then what ultimately led you to joining Fortris?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll keep it as streamlined as I can. So the sort of short of it, really, the summary is I basically spent a career in banking, right, in traditional finance. Did a couple of different roles and functions within that, right? I was doing private banking, I was doing some corporate banking, I eventually did commercial banking, and then my last role in banking was actually commodities finance, and that's kind of a key piece because my role was here in New York with ABN AMRO, one of the biggest commodity shipping groups in the world. And my role was to basically help traders finance round the world trips with cacao, coffee, right, whatever it was. And it was my first insight into just how complicated it is to actually move. I mean, forget about goods around the world, to move money around the world. And so I had an opportunity to join a couple, one and then again, a payments fintech startup. And saw, again, firsthand how that could be solved, spent some time there. And then from there was asked by an agency that I didn't know, are you interested in digital assets? And I said, well, I don't know much about it, but I've heard that they could be a solution to this whole global payments thing. And from there, I jumped straight in, joined Circle, spent a couple of years leading the team there. And then when I learned of Fortris and what Fortris was doing, and we can get into some of that later, I said, this is the role of a lifetime, and jumped at it, took it, and here I am 3 years later.
That's awesome. So it almost found you a headhunter situation, it sounds like there, Noah.
That was it. Yeah, that was it. There weren't, it's what sort of the TradFi meets like, crypto background is not, there's not a lot out there. And, Circle's a great breeding ground, great company, great offering, great product. And so, yeah, I think a lot of agents go there.
Great. John, how about yourself?
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that, Noah. Always cool to hear that story. Very, very simply put, I think it was around 2020, started hearing a bit about Bitcoin. I think that's when things were moving up and down. And I was like, okay, interesting. Let me look more into it. Very ironically enough, I met up with a financial investor. And he was like, oh yeah, you should look into this thing called XRP. And I was like, okay, I'll look into it. And this is like, I had heard about Bitcoin in the background. I'm like, all right, I'll look into it, see what's going on. Lo and behold, that kind of opened the door for me to learn more about stuff. And I was like, well, I think this other thing, Bitcoin, might be more interesting when you get down to the fundamentals and the philosophy. So all this to say, that was kind of like, it wasn't an orange pill. It was like something else that made me figure out or see the light myself, so to say. But so yeah, since about 4 or 5 years now, pretty involved in learning more about the space, the technology. And the interesting way I found Fortress was actually through a podcast, which is why I love podcasts. It was Peter McCormick's podcast, What Bitcoin Did. I'd always listen to that. It's kind of my go-to source to learn about stuff. And he had interviewed Tibor, one of the co-founders of Fortris. So for the most of my Bitcoin journey, it was like, Bitcoin, individual freedom, sovereignty, all that stuff yourself. And when Tibor gets on, he starts talking about businesses and enterprises and moving money around the world. And like, I got to be very honest, I remember exactly where I was walking on the street listening to this podcast when it like clicked for me. I was like, wait a minute, you could use Bitcoin as a business. And like for the longest time, it was like, the individual journey and the individual kind of like thesis. And I was like, man, you could use this as a business. And it just epiphany, it hit me. I was like, I got to connect with these guys. I chased Noah, I chased Tibor, I chased the other co-founder just to get on meetings. Like, tell me more about your technology. Like, what are you guys doing? And it was a very big moment for me to just like put two and two together to be like, the world needs to operate, businesses need to operate. Bitcoin is this amazing technology. Like, how do we make this work? So yeah, that's kind of my story and how we ended up here. But it's been pretty cool ride so far. Yeah.
It sounds like me and you, John, had a similar epiphany at the same time there, because I got into space back in 2020. And for you, Noah, just over 20 years ago, I had an account with ABN AMRO. I was based in Holland, serving with the military, and so that was one of the Dutch banks there.
Amazing.
So I spent 3 years with that bank there, so it brought back a few memories there. Now, we're not as familiar with this sort of podcast today because we generally do Bitcoin mining. So, from a high level, Noah, I'll ask you first. What is Fortris all about, and who do they serve?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we basically answer this question in two ways, right? But there's an overarching point, and the overarching point is the technology that was built a decade ago, right? John referred to our co-founder Tibor, and another co-founder Shane, who is also Canadian in Montreal. That piece of technology is exactly the same piece of technology, albeit ameliorated over 10 years, built out, et cetera. But what it was then is still what it is now. And we still serve the original customer as well as other customers that look like them to this day. We have a whole new cohort as well that we serve. So I say that as a preface to just say the technology itself and what we've done has been pretty consistent, right? It's been about 8 years in operation. We have run about 13 billion in Bitcoin through the platform since we started. We've of late, sometimes to the chagrin of our co-founders, run some stables through it, just because we have to. And at one point, before some of the like layer one add-ons like ordinals and stuff came through, we were running on average about 4.5% of all of the Bitcoin globally through the platform. So what is that to say? When we started out, we were skilled at, adept at, and continue to be adept at UTXO management and running high volume or high value Bitcoin into a platform, letting them do whatever they need to do with it. It's a business and or off-ramping, right? That's what we do. And yeah, the short summary is we basically can go to any business or a business will come to us that has really any need for or want to get engaged with, operate on Bitcoin and other digital assets. That's us in a nutshell.
Very interesting. And as Anthony says, we're going to have a lot of follow-ups here. You talk about UTXO management. So unspent transaction outputs, I believe, is the definition there. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works? Keeping in mind, a lot of us are individual wallet holders. When you're dealing with businesses, as you say, the volume and the value, of transactions, obviously a lot bigger.
Yep. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of our stock and trade as a company is that when you have such a long history, right, operating on an asset like Bitcoin, you have to, by dint of just our customers are starting to move more higher volume, higher value Bitcoin through this, you end up, if you do things right, hiring the best engineers, hiring people who love Bitcoin themselves, hiring the best talents in the world. It helps if your headquarters is on the side of a beach in Malaga, Spain. So that's something to think about, which is where most of our engineers sit. But they, I think, they understood from an early stage, this is an engine that can help any business, assist any business running on chain using Bitcoin. Specifically, the UTXO piece came from the fact that, as everyone knows, the protocol can get expensive, right? Gas fees can get expensive. It's a continuing problem. And so when you have, to your point, not just an individual holding a wallet who says, well, let me maximize utility of my own transactions and dollars or coin, but you have hundreds of thousands and millions of these transactions. Effectively, what we've done in the background is to create an order management service, which will basically take any portion of any transaction, pool it, capitalize on it, and then choose when traffic is least to route that order through the chain. So it's just a highly efficient system that, again, has been built and refined over about a decade.
We've heard some of these stories where these fees can be significant, even for small amounts of movements. So are you able to sort of, like what you just articulated there is, and that consistently works, is it by choosing those moments of beneficial to both parties?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, the short of it is, without going too much detail, that is an ever functioning system, right? Any business that comes to us and has BTC on chain is going to by default operate in that, which is nice to know. It's almost like an insurance policy. The other one, though, is anytime you execute an order through Fortris, you have options. This is a very critical, have to get it out in 20 minutes, or that's all right, we can wait 60 and see if we can get better pricing. So.
It almost reminds me of a digital Uber or something where you're carpooling transactions, you're picking priority surge price rides. It's very similar kind of in my mind.
Honestly, it's a brilliant metaphor.
There you go. See, we're learning as we go, and we're only 2 questions in. So now I went over to the website. I was doing some research, obviously, for the interview here today. It talks a lot about your platform. I think there's 3 core pillars. The ones I picked out were treasury integration and flexible custody. These kind of resonate. We've heard these buzzwords a lot at the conferences with the professionals we talk to. Can you tell us about what these are, first of all, and then how they would integrate to a business and their existing systems?
Absolutely. John, you want to take that, or you want me to?
Go for it. You're on a roll. Yeah.
All right. I mean, yeah, so the the caveat here, again, caveats are important, is that the way to think about Fortris and our partners, not just Fortris, right? We have a big ecosystem around us because very few businesses operate strictly on chain, right? So we need ways to touch the earth and take in fiat, et cetera. But Fortris, really at heart, is nothing other than what some people refer to as a TMS, transaction management system. Some people know the name Kyriba. Some people know the name FIS. Some people know SAP, NetSuite, right? These are all just systems that let businesses basically figure out where's our cash and how we're using it, right? Very simple stuff. That's with like dollars, right? Euro or renminbi, right? Which doesn't move in relation to itself. When we're talking about BTC, it's a whole different thing, right? So we effectively will come into an organization, whether it's like, 5 people, 10 people, or whether it's a multinational, and say, you run 99.9% of your business on fiat. You probably will for some time. But that 0.1% or that 1% or 10% that you're going to now test and start running transactions on chain, you plug in Fortris, and we effectively are going to do exactly what your backward compatible, as we call it, your SAPs, your TMSs, your do for you on your fiat basis. So that's the core. And so when we talk about like the subcategories, treasury, right, as an example, treasury operations or flexible custody, I think is the other one you said. Treasury operations just refers to that. It just means that you could be minting one Bitcoin a month, and maybe you don't want to deal with trying to figure out who do I have to owe, where am I sending money to? I've got suppliers, I've got customers, I've got to pay this invoice. We do all that. That's treasury operations, right? As opposed to treasury, which is more like a custody piece. And so for that piece, the flexible custody, we refer to that. What we mean is essentially, as you guys well know, having worked with some of the most crypto native groups in the world, right? Groups that are literally creating the Bitcoin. That is the bleeding edge of the tech, right? That's the bleeding edge of the DLT DA space. The rest of the world doesn't look like that. And so there's a lot of, we do a lot of comfort. We do a lot of consulting is really a way to think about it, from the smallest 5-person mining groups all the way up to multinationals, when their treasurers say, okay, we've identified that we have a problem on a balance sheet. We have a problem with this cash flow. We can't track our UTXO, whatever it is. Can you help us? We say, yeah, great. What are you thinking about for custody? You say, what does that mean? You say, well, you're used to keeping your capital in a bank, right? You go to the bank UI, I want to move this. You can do that with Fortris. That's kind of like the sort of most backward compatible edge of flexible custody, if you will. That's the Coinbase integration we have, among others. Then you have on the way other side, pure self-custody, which is us as a company becoming your technical counterparty and saying, you group 5, 10 multinational, we're going to give you everything. All the technology, all the vault ownership, all the keys, all of the cloud provisioning, all the HMS, all the FIPS 140, whatever you need to run the thing on your own, or something in between. That's what we mean by flexible custody.
Just as a quick follow-up before I talk about security, in terms of like when you provide a full package to a client, do you also support them regarding taxation implications on when Bitcoin's, is used? Because obviously, whether it be a company, whether it be an individual, as soon as there's a transaction occurs, there is a potential tax liability.
Yeah, we do. Short answer is yes. Yeah, we mostly speak with groups that are using TMSs like QuickBooks, right? As an example, NetSuite is a good example of like a sort of size that would fit to mining groups. We are an in-house partner, as an example of NetSuite, so-called SDN partner, right? Meaning that if you're operating on Fortris and you're taking positions and you're having to know what is my what's my position, what's my cash base, what does that mean for execution, cost base, et cetera, that's all being automatically captured and fed into your system. So yeah.
That's awesome. Now, obviously, if we didn't have the graphic on the screen, Fortress to me sounds something, secure, safe, and obviously we've in recent news we've seen some issues with regards to transactions, potential fraud being occurred on the blockchain. What type of security, compliance, and safety do you have, and compare that to competitors?
Sure. So the high level is always in the numbers, right? We have proudly advertised and still do our zero losses after 15 billion of processing, right? Continue to expect to do that. We also carry like both SOCs, we carry ISOs, so all of that stuff. We partner with all the big 8 and work with them on a consistent basis. But the short answer to your question is twofold. Two things really at the heart of everything, other than having a security team that scares all of us internally, which they repeatedly do. But the two sort of technological pieces, right? One of them is that we made a decision at start, right? Not we, I wasn't there at start, but the CTO, Tibor, that we were going to be a pure multi-signature system, multi-signature wallets, top to bottom. And we did that for a couple of different reasons. One is just organizational control, right? We never really wanted to be in the position where one person could do something, regardless of what that is. Always wanted to have two. So we basically request a minimum of 2 MBANs, right? That is one side. And everything we do within the system basically defaults to that, meaning you have controls built in top down, et cetera. And then the other one is the tech itself. So you can go with a Coinbase, right? And lots of people do. And it's your choice if you want, or you can go with any exchange, right? But if you choose to use Fortress's self-custody tech, which is where we really have the most of our assets, what you have the option to do is just like that. You can go and use Amazon Web or Google, right? Whatever you prefer. But if you really are focused on security, and again, we don't demand, but we urge it, you will use what we use, which is IBM's HSM hypercontainer private cloud storage, which itself is a FIPS 140-3 used in military grade, et cetera, so that effectively everything you do is in your own private cloud. So lots more there, but I won't get into detail.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I'm glad we hit on that. It's a hot topic for sure. John, anything to add there?
I was gonna say one thing in terms of like kind of helping remove the issue of the fraud, or like you kind of mentioned, Anthony, that could happen. So what we did set up really nicely is to build on top of the fact of the multi-sig is that we created approver groups. So every user is part of a group. Thereby, one person leaves, one person, gets fired or whatever. It doesn't really matter because the group access has different permissions based on different flows. So if you create an order, you are not the approver, and you're not approver number one, you're not approver number two. So the cool thing is that we actually have a cool visualization whereby you see who created what, who approves what, and it just helps for audit purposes. A good example is there's one group we have, they take donations in crypto, and they move funds to different wallets to have like the treasury stack and like kind of that float to do payroll, etc., or to pay suppliers. The person who creates is not the person who approves, and the board of directors of the group has full visibility on that. Even though they don't do anything, they can at least see what's going on. So it's a very good setup in terms of group permissions and very limited permissions per step. Not to mention the stuff like 2FA on every single thing that has to happen, and a pretty creative way to prevent man-in-the-middle attacks, which is based on a private kind of phrase, a private color you choose, so that before you set anything out or in, primarily out, you get prompted on the screen saying like you recognize your secret passphrase, which is not the same as the Bitcoin passphrase, but a code for the platform, as well as a color and a pattern. So it's like, again, like Noah mentioned, is built by a team of security professionals that when you talk to them, you kind of always question, you're like, am I living my life the right way with the way I store my passwords and security? So that gives us a lot of reassurance when we could speak proudly of the funds being safe.
As an accountant, it's music to my ears because key thing about controlling segregation of duties. Really, that's the key
Correct.
thing. So everyone has their own piece of the jigsaw puzzle, but nobody
Absolutely.
controls everything. So
That's exactly right.
Spot on.
And the very topical example of charity fraud you throw in there, John. So that was good to combat as well. Now, we wanted to talk, maybe you're best to answer this one, John, in terms of your sales conversations, when you go out to these miners or companies that are looking to integrate digital assets into their business, what are some of the most common kind of objections that you guys are hearing?
Typically, it's a little bit less on the objections. Not to say everyone uses Fortris. It's very interesting that we speak to so many different types of groups, right? We have I'll just use the example which build like that kind of nonprofit taking in donations. Speak to a lot of miners. Speak to even corporations that are slowly taking payments and wanting to stack a reserve of sorts. The reason I'm saying it's less roadblocks. It's more like understanding that not everyone is doing the same thing. Everyone is literally figuring it out themselves. Mm-hmm. So what the conversations typically go is we try to understand exactly what their current workflow is, but also what the ideal workflow is, and how do we fit in that solution? Because the truth is everyone is doing something completely different, which is a little not shocking, but it's very interesting to say that there is no recipe out there. What we notice as well too is a lot of people end up using multiple platforms, different platforms for accounting, different platforms for invoicing, different platforms for taking in payments, which is just kind of mind-boggling to understand that like even a very sophisticated Bitcoin first crypto friendly group still has 9 different partners they're working with. What ends up happening is that the more we understand or the more we explain our situation, our platform, we end up ticking the box as potentially replacing a lot of those different pieces. So that is one of the nice things we have, where it just takes a bit of time for someone to get a chance to remove all their current stuff and or replace us, or figure out how do we fit in that flow they have of currently using, 4 or 5 different platforms.
Sorry, just a follow up there. And Noah, as you're describing that, John, it sounds like what you were saying earlier, Noah, almost this consultation partnership role in understanding the business. Is there a specific product or service that's drawing people in, John, to Fortris that they come asking about, and then you kind of explain this holistic solution?
Yeah, so I'd say it's maybe 2 things, maybe even a third. And if you have another one, Noah, please add. We have the ability to take payments. So that's like the first thing. Some people are like, okay, so I can send an invoice. We were talking to a professional services group the other day, Anthony, kind of like exactly in your field, American based. And he was like, are you telling me I can now take crypto payments and I'll be able to track that and send an invoice? So the eyes lit up with just the ability to send something professional other than here's like my Bitcoin address. So that's like the one thing is taking in payments. That sounds so simple, but it's literally a problem. Invoicing seems to be an issue sometimes for certain groups. And it's the difference between a few invoices a month versus hundreds or thousands of invoices a month. There's like a big difference there. But again, tying that all into one platform, that's where the eyes light up sometimes where people are like, okay, so I only need one platform to do this. So it's payments, invoicing. And another one that's actually quite interesting is a lot of these groups we're speaking to, particularly Bitcoin mining groups, they're all in a phase, and you guys would know this very well. They're all scaling. They're all doubling, tripling, quadrupling their size in the next, by the end of the year, which is always very impressive. But what they see as they scale is they need more people to be part of the business. So they would like to have visibility on Sally will do this, Joe will do that. So they actually like the idea of having multiple users in one UI with visibility to track all that. So it's the idea of having that tracking ability and the audit ability, as opposed to hopefully trusting Sally with one thing and Joe with the other, and like not being sure what they did is right or have they done it yet. So it's kind of those like workflows of an actual business operating with Bitcoin. Those are typically the biggest things. I don't know if you'd like to add anything, Noah. Did I maybe miss something?
There is one more which may or may not be relevant. I mean, maybe it is relevant because we work with some, a lot of the mining groups seem to be US based, although now they have operations which cross borders. One of the thing I think you asked, Bryce, like what draws a group to you? A direct answer, that's a fourth type of group, which can range in size from a relatively small mining operation to, a FTSE 100 or a multinational, right? And it's the same concept, which is it's somewhere in the group's balance sheet or cash flows. It is either very expensive, it's very slow, it's very complex, or all of the three combined to move funds. That could be something as simple as payroll, right? We're a US group, but we've got people operating in the Baltics and our banks are cutting us off. The list goes on. So that is a use case that, again, it's not Fortris proper. It's our partner ecosystem. We work with a lot of on-off ramp groups around the world. But it's a universal demand, right? Groups will come to us and say, we can't move these funds. Banks are cutting us off. Even some of the Bitcoin mining groups, right? Like these credit card companies are not that bright. And if they see Bitcoin, they're like, oh, Bitcoin, we don't want to do it. And the group's like, oh, no. Well, we don't own Bitcoin. We're not a Bitcoin business. We're miners. We're mining it, right? It's computers, it's IT, it's real estate, it's infra. That is a almost now ubiquitous and universal demand. To your other question, Bryce, it's also a huge impediment to sales, right? We end up in a lot of conversations where we have sold someone or they have helped to sell themselves on like, hey, if we can do this on chain, it's a whole different world for our business. We say, great, excellent. What do you need next? And they go and they talk to the board and they come back like a dog that just got beaten and they say, oh, yeah, no, that was a no. That was actually just a no. Like there's a lot of those conversations and we say, got it, understood, and we'll give them all the right collateral. We'll coach them. We'll say, no, it's not, crypto as you've heard in the news. It's a treasury management operation system that takes your business, helps it run on chain, feeds it, accounts for it, and secures the data. But it is an impediment getting this through boards, which tend to be not the most forward-thinking and tech-savvy of groups.
In terms of adoption, I always use the analogy with Bitcoin as using like the iPhone and thinking back to my first iPhone, which was I bought the iPhone 3 because I had a Motorola flip phone that could make a call and I could do a text. That's all I needed to do. I didn't need to do anything else. So it was my son that said to me, Dad, get yourself a decent phone because you can link it to your car and answer the phone in the car then. So I bought the iPhone 3 and I've never stopped using Apple products since then. What analogy would you use as to where you guys are now in terms of, adoption and, business? You mentioned some impressive numbers at the start of the podcast there, the amount of, transaction, but and I'm assuming the way this conversation's gone, is the end game looking at say what Visa and MasterCard do in terms of the sheer size and monopoly that they have over every transaction that goes, through North America and the rest of the world?
Right. Well, so I'll answer. That's really two questions in one. So I'll answer them both. The first one is, what was essentially like, where are we as a business, right? What do we see? And I think, I don't know if you guys have heard of this book. Our CEO referenced it to me like 4 years ago. It's called Crossing the Chasm. It's a little bit older book, but it basically refers to how it is that people and then the businesses that serve people adopt a new technology. And it's quite good. It's quite succinct. You only need to read a couple chapters to kind of get the point, which is in any new technology, you basically have this crowd of early adopters who are either like, I am the one who does this. I'm going to test this thing. I don't care. I'm like the beta guy. Or as you guys would say, Anthony, the beta guy. But anyway, we don't mind if it's buggy, faulty, right? We're going to use it because we know it's there and it's solving a problem for us. That was our first customer. And again, still is. And that happens. And there's this little rise, right? And you're like, wow, actually there's adoption here. And you build out the customer base and all of a sudden flat because there is nobody after that new, I forget the term they use. We have thankfully at this point, I believe, basically it's like in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, they run across that rope bridge and it starts to fall and they're hanging on you. We're like right at that point, right by the cliff where we are not quite over the chasm, but we have the sounds and signals and the lines coming down from the next phase of adopters, which I forget what they call them, early adopters, I think. So business-wise, that's where we are. A lot of the groups that you guys are working with and that John's brought in and we're having conversations with, they're kind of more on the early adopter side. It's the next phase that is the important one, and I think that's happening now. And it does tie into the second question, which is I believe that the stablecoin industry believes that it will surpass the levels of Visa, MasterCard, and it's very much their goal. And it'd probably be a good thing, right? It's wouldn't be a bad thing. Certainly, if we incorporate some BTC into that, it's not our intention to try and do that. What we believe will happen, though, is again, if you think that's 100% of sort of cross-border, call it retail flows right now, at some point in the near future, that'll move to 99%. And that 1% absolutely can and would be. And we believe it's reasonable to think that it would be filled by DLT and DM.
Great, you guys. Hey, just a couple more questions for you as we wrap up here. The final one I wanted to throw your way, in terms of upcoming products, services, events even that you're attending, we've talked a lot about the platform. I definitely have a much better understanding of what Fortris is than I did an hour ago. What can we look for in terms of upcoming catalysts here for the company?
Well, so I could answer that, and then I think John should too. We attend events all around the world, conferences all around the world, and they're reflective. They're very different groups of people, right? We attend conferences like Eurofinance, right, which you won't see a minor, few and far between, right? You're gonna see Colgate and Cisco, and right. But these are all the groups that again have gotten very close to running their own transactions. We also attend almost every Bitcoin mining event all around the world. And then we attend all manner and sort of events with respect to, say, payments, right? Even just regular payment processing. Any group that's doing this in fiat has an ear out and now understands, like, okay, this is a real thing, and this is a way for us to be more efficient, make more money, save our customers more money, et cetera. So yeah, global events, including like Token 2049, Dubai, including we were in DC last week for the Bitcoin policy initiative with Michael Saylor and the senators. We're going to be in DC again next week with the Digital Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, we're everywhere we can be. We like to be in more places, can't be, but yeah, I don't know. That's a quick summary. Last piece I'll say and then pass to John is, we will always be ameliorating the product, right? The product itself, the core, is always going to be built on, but it's not like it's fundamentally changing. All we're doing is adding skill sets to existing tech. One of the ways that or the new product bits, if you will, is essentially, and I referenced this earlier, the curation, right? We've sort of curated the world, if you want to think about it that way, to source and find the best on-off ramp exchange and liquidity groups out there, meaning that for any business that doesn't just need to operate domestically in the US, but maybe needs to send a payment somewhere, or maybe needs to send many payments somewhere, or has funding sources that are different than it's inbound, that is something we are constantly adding to, and is a critical piece, because most of these groups, even though they're mining Bitcoin, still need to take fiat, right? So
yeah, I'd say you're spot on with the concept of actually just, again, building a really solid base of groups around us. And a good example, two very good examples of that, I'd say, would be as we move more towards serving Bitcoin miners. I could be wrong. It's either 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 are literally all saying they use QuickBooks. Maybe I'm wrong. Someone out there might be using something different, maybe especially the larger groups. That feedback we took right away back to our team. And now the goal is by end of Q2, we'll have a full integration with QuickBooks. So what we're really good at doing is whatever we hear on the ground, this is my pain point. This is my reality. I'm using this, but it sucks. I'm using this, but it's too expensive. We'll go back. By the way, like I don't know if we mentioned this. We're a team of about 120 employees globally. About 70, 80, I could be wrong, maybe even 90 of those are all developers. So we have a very, very strong tech team that has really awesome roadmap, a quarterly roadmap with different targets. Sometimes the priorities could shift if we hear that this segment is looking for something specific. In terms of relatively exciting stuff that will come more towards the end of the year, we're talking about off-ramping, on-ramping. We already have amazing partners for that do offer pretty incredible rates. I don't know if I won't give the name, but we were speaking to a group earlier this week. They told us what some big exchanges were offering for on-ramp, off-ramp. We took it back to our group and we literally cut it by a third. And now the mining group is very interested to move forward with us because they're just kind of one of the peripheral. It's like almost like nice benefits. You get these kind of added bonus points by using Fortris. But what we will do with that off-ramp partner is in maybe Q3. I could be wrong here. Q3, Q4. That will be baked into our UI. So you will be able to off ramp within our UI and you kind of save a step by having to go off. So the idea is over time, stuff like swaps on off ramps will all be baked in within our software. And there's like, we have this kind of golden path or this North Star that is in the future, maybe within a year and a half, we'll have a world where we'll be able to integrate with any type of custody solution. Your ledger, your cold card, like a Gemini, you name it, crack, wherever you are, globally, it will be agnostic for us. So like we're always kind of literally looking for what's the best way forward. What does the market maybe not know they need, but would want to need in the future? So big question, big way to answer that. Hope it's clear with a few examples, but the long and short of it is we're literally building the best technology out there right now.
That's perfect. Helping people and businesses solve problems. It's got the gears going in my head, Anthony. We may need to get something going with power mining analysis and Fortris here.
You bet.
And we use QuickBooks.
There you go.
Okay, let's book a call right after this.
Crypto on the balance sheet, so we're sort of like we're halfway there on most of these things.
We should actually. You should pay us. You should charge us in Bitcoin.
We knew this the whole time.
Look at that. They tricked us, Anthony.
Guys, send that invoice. Well, we're only paying Bitcoin.
There you go. I stole this line from your guys' website, but I think this is honestly a great way to summarize the company, helping you integrate digital assets into daily operations, simplifying the process, explaining it, and holding your hand along the journey, growing with you. So, you guys, thanks so much for the time today. I can confidently say we have a lot of new knowledge we didn't just a few hours ago. If you guys have any questions, you want to get in touch, John, what's the best way for people watching? I'll leave the corporate website linked below. How should they get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, great question. Noah and I are pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find us on LinkedIn and or fill in that form on the fortris.com website. It'll end up to Noah and I anyway, so whatever you're more comfortable with. But yeah, online, we're very available.
Easy enough. Thanks so much, guys. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. We'll see you back here tomorrow.